been looking forward to. This is another exciting moment that we've been looking forward to have. Coming from the questions that I received, how can one improve on reading? What is effective reading? What are the types of reading and all that, and all those many questions that we have had, we have put them together to come up with those objectives which are going to be achieved by Gladys Chikondi Daka. Gladys is coming from a wealth background. She's a personal coach, and she is a risk management and financial expert. So she has what it takes to lead us in this conversation. So without further much ado, I will invite Gladys not to say so much about herself, but to get direct into the conversation that we are having today. I can begin opening up asking Gladys that what is effective book reading and why reading? Let's pick it up from there and lead us. Gladys, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to you all. And probably I'll just make mention, as indicated earlier, I just want to give a brief background in terms of why I started reading, or my journey in terms of reading, and then we can go to what is effective reading. So in terms of my journey, I think I started 5 years ago. That was 2018. And I decided to say I'll be reading a book on a monthly basis. And for me, it was about building confidence, as well as also just improving my concentration levels, as well as focus levels. Because I realized that there's sometimes you're reading documents, and because the documents are so many, or the documents are so much in terms of the pages that you need to read, you lose focus along the way, and you forget what you would have actually read, or you are not able to connect the dots. So in so doing, I decided to train myself, because I listened to a podcast, which one of the teachers of the podcast indicated to say one of the ways that we need actually to improve our reading focus is to ensure that we continue reading and developing that mental muscle for you to be able to focus as well as grasp what you're reading. Because along the way, if you're not careful, even as you read, as you start your reading journey, you realize that sometimes you get lost in the process. So for me to be able to do that, I thought, okay, probably a good start would be for me to read a book every month. And I also realized to say, one of the things that came to mind was that as I read and as I started reading, I realized that I was building confidence in terms of who I was and how I was able to actually express myself, how I was able to actually present myself, as well as also it did help me in terms of building a rich vocabulary, even as you are communicating with different people. So I think those were some of the things that really encouraged me to pursue the reading journey and continue in the reading process. But also the knowledge that you actually gain, I think you can't take it away from you, because ultimately what tends to happen is that you become knowledgeable. That's a fact, and you're able to contribute in any conversation that you are actually having with different people, because you have minds of different people that you have read and that you have assumed as an individual. So those are some of the things that actually encouraged me to be able to continue. But the question is, what is effective reading? And maybe I'll go back to say, was I effective in reading when I started? So the answer is no, because first I gave myself ambitious targets. And ambitious targets in the sense that I said, I'll read a book a month. And before I know it, I said, no, I think one book per month is not enough. So I said, okay, I'll be reading 2 books. I'll be reading 4 books in a month. And what that did was that I was reading to finish a book instead of reading to understand or to grasp what's actually in the book. So that in itself, I think there was that derail to say, for me to read was to meet a target, to say I have to read 4 books in a month. On a weekly basis, I have to finish a book. Whether I understand the book, whether I comprehend what is actually being talked about in the book was not really a factor for me at that particular point in time, because I was just starting and I was trying to get to a target. But I realized to say that it was not very effective, because it's like I'm rushing through without understanding, just to tick a box to say that I have completed reading. which is one thing that we should be mindful of even as we start our reading journey. So what I always encourage people is that you need to read at your own pace. I think it's very important to understand your pace, and it's okay if you can only read one book in a month. Sometimes we try to punish ourselves. We try to actually push ourselves to something that we know that probably it's not working out for us. But we want to just tick that box to say that I've read a book in a month, or I've read 4 books in a month, which is not very effective, if I tell you, because ultimately you will not be able to comprehend what's in that book. You will not be able to understand the things that are in the book. So one way that you can probably rate yourself is give yourself time, because everything builds with time. It's like running, right? Today I'll run and probably my pace will be different when I'm starting to the time that I've been running, to a person who's been running maybe for the last 2 years or for the last 1 year. So we need to understand to say even reading is the same. It's a mental exercise, basically. It's more like the physical exercise that you do. So with physical exercise, you can tell yourself to say you do 10 kilometers, but the pace that you do 10 kilometers as you start running is different from the pace that you do 10 kilometers if you've been a runner in the last 5 years or in the last 3 years. So I think those are some of the dynamics that we need to understand even as we are coming up with this book club, to say we have different paces, and it's okay to read at a certain pace. And it's okay, we should be able to be fine with it, because we are building that mental muscle, which we do not have. Because if we push ourselves so much, what tends to happen is that you find yourself frustrated, because it's like you're punishing yourself in doing so. So you need to first probably enjoy what you're doing. And as you enjoy what you're doing, as you go through the books that you're actually reading, it takes a bit of time for you to be able to increase the pace. And therefore, as you enjoy, you'll be able to increase the pace slowly and gradually. And therefore, ultimately, you'll be able to understand the book, but also to finish it on time. So my encouragement always is, for effective reading, you need to first have one point in mind. You need to ensure that you know your pace and you know where you are. Because if you do not know your pace and you do not know where you're starting from, I'll be comparing myself to somebody who's been reading all their lives, which should not be the case. I know people who read books, probably 1 book in a day or 2 books within a week. They'll read even 6 books, 8 books within a month. But if you are starting as a reader, and if you want to be effective in your reading, you need to just ensure that ultimately what you're reading, you're understanding. And with the pace comes gradually as you continue to read. So it's not a punishment or something that you should be able to stick to, say, I need to finish this book. If your pace, yes, there's a difference between discipline in terms of ensuring that you finish, but also there's also the issue of you finishing because you want to demonstrate that you finished reading the book, but without understanding. So you can discipline yourself to say, this is the time that I'll be taking to read this book, and I'll need to finish this book within 1 month. And you can give yourself that time. However, what the challenge is when you give yourself pressure to actually finish a book without actually understanding. Then in terms of effective reading, one of the things that probably one of the things that you have learned in my whole reading journey in terms of how I'm able to know to say that I've fully understood something, there's a practice which I learned I think a few years ago. One of the things I would do is read a book and pack it. But I was challenged in my earlier days as I started reading to say, if you fully understood this book, are you able to summarize the content of this book? And those are some of the things that will be able to help you test yourself to say, have you fully understood what is written in this book? So what I do as a way of just helping me to see if I've understood the content of the book, I actually try to summarize every chapter. So each time I read a chapter, I just write down notes in terms of the key things that I've learned within that chapter, because I understand that every chapter that is in a book is a lesson in itself. So there are lessons that are there that I should be able to pick as an individual. So what I try to test myself is that after I read a book or after I read a chapter, I'm able to write down to say, these are the key notes that I've actually taken through. And that way it's effective, because as I write down, and probably we all have different learning styles. And one of the learning styles I have adopted, which has worked very well for me, is writing down notes. So one of the things that I do, even in my free time, when I want to remember something or when I want to just ensure that there's something that's done, I write it down. So writing down is very effective for me because when I write something down, it's like I'm connecting my brain to something that I've seen. So it's like I'm able to remember more than me just reading it and leaving it out there. So I encourage everyone to say, if probably if you want to try to test your effectiveness, write down those notes, be able to summarize that chapter, as well as also maybe one of the key things that you can do, and that's something that has helped me, is to highlight the key points even as I read. When there's something that is catchy, even as I read, or something that has caught my attention, I'm able to highlight it with a marker just to ensure that I don't forget to say that there's this actual point that has actually caught my attention even as I was reading. Sometimes it takes you just to underline that point or write it down in your notebook to say, probably this is a point that has captured your mind. So those are some of the things that can help you to be effective in your reading. And therefore, those are some of the things that I would actually encourage all of us to be able to do, even as we read. Take down the notes, read slowly, read at your own pace, never rush the pace. And I think that's where we get it wrong, because we always want to finish the books, to say, okay, this book, I've completed it, I've completed it. But it's no point if you're able to finish even 10 books, but you're not able to remember or recollect or bring to memory in terms of the things that you actually learned in those books. So my encouragement always is read at your own pace. Take down notes, have a marker, color or highlight the areas that have probably caught your attention. Also ensure that you summarize the chapters as you finish reading the book, because ultimately that's the only effective way that you'll be able to remember the things that probably have caught your attention, or the things that you have to remember in that book. Not sure if I've answered the first question on how effective, how do you know that you're effective in your reading? Is it? You can just correct me.
All right. We are getting it from your experience. So I would say you have answered yes, because it was a question, and we are basing on your personal experience, and of course from the best practices like you were making references. Sure, you can give us the next answer, and perhaps you dive into everything that you prepared for us this evening.
Sure. So I think there was also a question that probably you posed to say, how do you set your reading goals? What are your reading goals? So in terms of setting up reading goals, it goes with what kind of reading materials do you want to be reading? I think that's the first question I ask myself, to say, as I come up with my reading goals or my reading plan. So previously, when I was actually starting, I had certain materials that I actually enjoyed reading. And because I was a bit, I hadn't yet developed that mental capacity, for lack of a better term. I had certain books that I would enjoy reading and I would stick to them. So I had religious books, for example. So I would read the Billy Graham's books, Miles Monroe's books. I would read probably just different TD Jakes books. I would read different writers' books, and they were all spiritual books, because there was a connection, there was something that I had connected to. And it was easier for me to be able to connect and understand what they were actually writing, because it was a journey that I was already doing. Whether it's the Bible, I was reading the Bible, I was making reference to these books that have been written. So it was quite easy for me to understand even the content that was in that book, because I had some background in terms of reading. So when I started my reading journey, I stuck to these books to say, okay, I would buy all these spiritual books and I'll put them and read them one by one. But I realized to say, as I actually grew in the journey, as I moved from one point to the other, I started adding other books. I started adding, whether it's motivational books, I started adding books that probably health books. I bought some health books because I was now getting interested in my health and trying to see how I can balance the kind of literature that I had. I started reading finance books. I started reading economic books. And sometimes in the line of work that you do, you also start reading certain books that are in line with the works that you actually do. So from my side, I'm in the operations and technology world. So I started reading articles relating to the things that were happening so that I'm actually present. Sorry, you can't get me?
Oh, so sorry, there's just someone, we are responding to someone. You can proceed.
Oh, okay.
There's someone who
All
can't
right.
hear you, but you are loud and clear.
Sure. So as I grew in the journey, I started adding other literatures or other books that could actually help me or to actually build me. So in terms of starting out, always encourage people to say, if you're starting out, start with something that you're familiar with. Definitely, if you are just starting and you go, maybe you're not even in economics, you're not in finance, or maybe you're not in technology like you, maybe one of the things that probably you not do is go and get a technology book or artificial intelligence book, because you'll be confused and you'll not finish that book. And it will be a challenge, you'll be defeated at first sight. So what I always encourage people is that even as you start reading, read something that interests you. Read something that triggers you or that motivates you to be able to continue to actually read, to be able to continue to actually develop yourself. Because if you read one book which is interesting, like I started with the spiritual books because I was developing my spiritual side. So it was easier for me to get more books because I was interested. It was something that I was triggered to actually do to develop myself and my spiritual being. So it was quite easy for me to do even one book in a month because it's something that I loved. I was like, okay, I'm reading this book by T.D. Jakes. Oh, I'm reading this book by Miles Monroe. I'm reading this book by maybe Joyce Meyer. I'm reading this book by Pastor Oyedepo or something. So it was something that was intriguing to me because I was growing spiritually and I was already connected. I was coming from a point where I was growing my faith or my spiritual being. So it was quite easy for me to be able to read those books because they were of interest to me. It was something that I was interested in. So I always tell or encourage people to say, if you're starting your reading journey, the first thing in terms of setting your goals is ensure that you start by reading things that you're interested in, things that you're intrigued by. You can't go and read an artificial intelligence book if you have nothing to do with technology. I think it will be all boring first, and before you know it, you fail to finish that book because ultimately it's not of interest to you. It's not anything that triggers your sense to be able to read more. So it becomes frustrating to be able to even finish that book. So the first encouragement is choose a field that you're familiar with and that you are interested in and where you want to gain knowledge, and start reading books. Even the books that you read, I think one of the key things that you need to do is ensure that as you start reading, get the smaller books. There's no point in getting a 500-pager book and you're just starting your reading journey. I think the smaller books actually do help because it gives you that motivation that you're able to complete a book and you're able to finish it end to end. So one of the things that I do encourage people is that when you're starting your reading journey, get a smaller book, maybe even a 100-pager book, even a 50-pager book, it's fine. And most of the times, I think the challenge that we have is that, especially belonging to a book club, unfortunately, sometimes it can be competitive. When you see, okay, Mr. Muller is actually reading maybe 10 books, or maybe he's reading 4 books in a month, and I also want to do something like him. And it's fine because we're here to encourage one another, but you need to understand to say, okay, maybe he's been doing it for some time, and I also need to be okay in reading at my own pace. And therefore, I'm okay probably reading this book. Maybe if it takes Mr. Muller 2 months or a month, or maybe it takes him a week, it's fine that it takes me 1 month. So get that small book, start reading it. Even when they finish the review, they revise, take your time, go through it and spend more time understanding, because ultimately it's about you and not the whole book club, because we're all at different levels and therefore we can't be at the same level. We're all starting at differently. So it's fine to be somewhere, but be encouraged and inspired by those who've actually gone ahead of you. Then you need to ensure that even as you pick, like for what I did, as I started with my spiritual books, I added something that I was also interested in. I added finance books. I started adding finance books because I was interested in the field of finance. And I started reading a lot of finance books, a lot of wealth books. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and it encouraged me to buy more books in that area. So already there's an interest that has come in. But before I realized it, I noticed to say that my reading wasn't balanced, and therefore I was not growing, or I was growing in one angle. So what I did was that, how do I balance even as I go and buy these books? What can I add to my library? What do I want to develop in? So it was about, what am I trying to develop myself into, whether it's leadership or buy leadership books. Okay, maybe this month I'm focusing on leadership, or this year it's all about helping me build leadership capacity. So I'll spend my time attending leadership seminars. I'll spend my time reading leadership books. I'll spend my time probably ensuring that I'm well vested in the leadership area, whether it's attending training, whether it's actually going into these workshops. I just dedicated that time. And it's the same with reading. I said, okay, I'll buy all these books, whether it's John C. Maxwell, whether it's Simon Sinek, all those books. I said, okay, I'll buy these books because it's an area of interest for me. So I always encourage people to say, start with the area of interest. After you start with the area of interest, start expanding your horizon, because ultimately you can't only know spiritual things. You can't only be vested in one area. Start adding other books. Start looking at economics, because now you have a mind of a reader. Now you're able to read. You're able to grasp things. So it's easy when you have some background, or you have a foundation that you're actually building on, to add things that probably are not really in your domain per se. So ensure that you graduate from reading motivational books alone. I always tell people to say, motivational books alone won't grow you. Ensure that you leave that space. Yes, they're exciting, and it's easier to read a motivational book or listen to a motivational speaker, but ultimately, seek for things that will actually mature you, seek for things that will actually grow you, seek for things that will actually challenge you, challenge your horizon, challenge your mental capacity, your thinking ability, your focus levels, as well as be able to help you to build that confidence that you probably want to have, even as you stand there to speak out. So those are some of the things that probably one can actually do in terms of setting up goals. Then in terms of time frame, I'll go back to my points. When you're setting your reading goals, for me, when you're starting, don't really bother about that time frame. Don't really punish yourself. And that's the biggest mistake that we actually give ourselves, to say, I need to read this book within 1 week. I need to read this book, but you're not getting anything. I think it's very important to slowly maintain a pace, but it should be a good pace, but also ensure that you keep on improving, because there's no point for you to keep on running the same rate or the same pace, but you're not improving in terms of your reading capabilities or your reading abilities, or how long it's actually taking you to read a book. So you can start with a month, to say, I'll give myself 1 month, and in a year, I want to read maybe 12 books. And you can give yourself to say, these are the books that I'll actually read within a year. Or you say, I'll read 2 books in a month, and in a year, I'll read 24 books. And these are the kind of books that I'll read, whether they'll be too spiritual, actually grow as an individual. Then with time, you'll be able to actually progress. Like I indicated, to say today, when I started with 1 book in a month. And sometimes 1 book in a month would even be a challenge. I would even take 2 months sometimes to finish. And sometimes you can attribute it to, say, discipline. If you read 2 pages in a day, you'll be able to actually finish that book. But there's times where you just don't feel like reading when you're starting. So again, it's okay, but always ensure that you have a target, to say, I tell myself to say, I'll have to read 2 books in a month. What times will I actually set to be reading these books? So have a set time within yourself to say, okay, within the way you set your time for exercise. I always like to compare reading books to exercise. You set a time to say, every morning at 05:30, I wake up and go to the gym. And I'll spend 30 minutes in the gym, or I'll spend an hour or 60 minutes in the gym. It's the same way that you need to set up time to read, to say, probably early in the morning, when the day just starts, after I do my running, after I do my jogging, after I do my exercise, maybe after I take my shower, I'll take maybe 30 minutes to actually read. And you need to be deliberate. Unfortunately, we're all busy people. And what is important for you, you always prioritize. The way you prioritize the gym, the way you prioritize your physical health, it's the same that you have to prioritize your mental being, because reading is about you building your mental muscle, you building your mental being, and therefore it's something that you need to be deliberate about. So set that time to say, I'll read for 30 minutes, or after 30 minutes, this is what I'll read every day. And unfortunately, with issues of reading, it's also about discipline, right? So in a situation where you want to set some targets to say, this is the target that I have to be able to read and complete this book, you need to be disciplined to be able to follow the times, to say, this is the time that I'll be reading, and be religious in following that time, because it will help you to be able to build a habit and be consistent, because it's about consistency. It's about you building a habit. It's about you ensuring that ultimately you actually meet the targets that you've set, or the goals that you've actually set for yourself. So that's one of the important things that I just wanted to raise, to say, ultimately, it's about discipline, it's about consistency and creating a habit in terms of reading. Then also, just aside the time that you need to set, I think one of the effective ways is a club like this. I think it challenges us to be better. If I see Mr. Mwela is doing this and these are the best practices that he has, I think as individuals, we should always aim at improving ourselves. Yes, when we're starting, I said a lot of things to say. It's okay to be on your pace. It's okay to ensure to read a book maybe within a month. It's okay to not be pressured, but it's not okay to be content where you are. We should always aim at improving. As individuals, as human beings, we are built for improvement. And we should never be content to say, okay, I'm reading one book in a month and that's fine. I think we should always try to improve in our different areas, our different spaces. It's like the pace that we run. I think most runners, they'll tell you to say they measure their success, or they measure how well they're doing based on the pace that they're able to cover a distance. So it's about, how are you improving? Are you making strides in terms of what you are doing? Is there, can you see some improvement maybe from 5 years ago when you started reading to now? What improvements are you able to see? How's your reading? How's the pace? How many books have you read? How's the understanding now? How's your comprehension now, in terms of ensuring that you understand what you're actually able to read? So those are some of the things that probably you should be able to look at. Then one of the things that I thought of just indicating is also just ensuring that you use your idle time effectively. Most of the times we say we don't have time, but one of the things that I've noted is that I always carry a book in my handbag, or whether it's in the car or wherever I am, I carry a book, because I know that there are certain times where you have idle time, but you engage in other things that may be not really productive. So instead of you being unproductive, I always encourage to say you can carry a book, a small book, and you can actually get to read that book in your free time, so that you also don't waste a lot of time, because it's easy to actually waste time and do nothing and say you don't have time, yet you had the whole day, 24 hours to yourself. Somebody always says, we all have 24 hours. It's all about what we prioritize and what we do with the time. So if reading is really a goal for you, and if reading is something that you need to develop, I think one of the things that you do is have a deliberate goal and set it, be clear to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how I will do it. It's like any other goal you have, whether it's a financial goal, whether it's a physical health goal, you need to be deliberate. You need to have objectives, and the objectives have to be smart, to say these are the things that you achieve within a specified period of time, and therefore you won't be able to lose sight of that goal. So I thought of just highlighting that. I'm not sure if there are any questions at this point in time, or if there's anything that you'd want to comment on, Mr. Mwela.
All right. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. My key takeaways, I think I've taken note of what you have shared. I think being a reader, who also, I think I grew up, my father who used to read, but along the way, we lost it. I think I just made a deliberate decision, which is, I think, between 2013, 2015. And I embarked on that journey, and I have never looked back. The insights that you have shared, I think for me, it's like you were mentioning my mind. Those are the things that I believe and I have lived for. I think maybe that's why I have I am where I am today. All right, let me read something from the chat box, and then we will we invite some questions at this moment. So there is from Mwanko. Mwanko, let me just call you as Mwanko. All right, who is Roy Kaonga. Interesting. How does one know what they are interested in? Taking a leaf from your experience, is passion closely related to interest? Very interesting.
Yeah. Wow, great question. And I say great question because I think I was speaking to a group of young people, and one of the things that they were asking is, I think it's almost a different question. It's an issue of egg chicken. The question was, how do I know my passion? Like, how do I know that this is my passion or what I'm passionate about? I think that was the question. So I think it goes with what are you interested in when you sit on your own? What triggers you? What motivates you? What makes you actually say what catches your mind to say, okay, this is something that right now, if even maybe there's something that's of interest to you, or something, or there's noise in the background, but if you're reading that thing, or maybe you're watching that thing, there's no distraction. It's like you're really, really focused. So that's how you know that you're really interested in something. So interest and passion, I'll tell you to say, what you're interested in, you become passionate about. So you become passionate about something that you're interested in. Because you're interested in it, you tend to do a lot of work in terms of discovering and finding out, reading about it. And before you know it, you develop that passion for that particular thing that you're interested in. But the question is, how do you know your interest? How do you know let me just read it again. It's a very good question. How does one know that what they are interested in? So it's something that keeps you glued. It's something that you constantly think about. That's your interest. What are you interested in? I'll tell you to say, for me, each time I think to say, okay, probably which wealth book will I read, or which financial book will I read? Because I'm interested in finances. So it's something that I know to say, this is my passion, this is what I'm interested in. And if somebody brings finances or talks about financial, it triggers me. I thought having a conversation, I want to know, I'm interested in it. It's something that I want to get more details, more information. So an interest is something that you always maybe have your focus on, something that keeps you awake, or something that you constantly think of, or that's constantly on your mind. So that's an interest. And then with that interest, as you keep on finding out more, as you keep on probably growing the interest, it becomes a passion. You become passionate about something because you know everything about it, because of the interest that you developed in it, you've gathered so much information that you've become passionate about it, and you're able to explain it to different people. I'll give an example of Mr. Muller. I'll tell you to say, probably he had an interest in reading. There was an interest that was triggered to say, you know what, I wanted to start reading. So let me start this book club. And before you know it, he's become passionate, and he's brought so many people, the 300 people he's talked about, because it's his passion. And somebody was telling me to say, but why don't you read a lot of books? Why don't you bring people, review books? For me, it's not my passion to bring people and start. He's probably gone ahead and done quite a lot. For me, I came here to share my experience, not that I wanted to make a book club, because it's not my passion. Yes, I'm interested in reading, but it's reading for my own development. There's a question, I think.
Yes, please.
I hope I've answered your question. Sure. So there's a question, between hard copies and soft copies, which one would you recommend someone starting out with? Okay, so it depends on a lot of things. If you're a tech savvy person, like somebody who loves gadgets, I think they find it easier to read things on a gadget, on their iPads or even on their phones. However, if you're like me, old school, I love the hard copy books because I'm able to color, I'm able to write, I'm able to cross over. So I think it depends on the kind of a person that you are. If you're good at gadgets and you love everything on gadgets, I know I'm old school. I love my physical Bible because I'm able to color it and I feel I understand more and connect more. So it depends on the kind of person you are and which generation. So I wouldn't want to prescribe to say go for the gadget or go for the hard copy. Maybe your generation is not that was using the hard copy books or the Bibles or the any physical copy books that probably you would have. Maybe your generation is the Gen Zs or X, where everything was iPad, everything is the computer and everything. So it's difficult for such a person to actually go to a physical book. So again, know yourself, what works for you. It's not a casting stone. As long as it works for you, you can do that.
All right, thank you. Before we get back to the chat box, let's just see the hands. So we have a hand from Vincent Ngala and from Kalumba. So we will start with Vincent and Kalumba. So we can pick the two questions and then you respond to them at the same time. And then we'll get back to the questions in the chat box. So Vincent and then Kalumba. If you mind, you can unmute, you can open your camera. If you're not comfortable, that's fine. So please, Vincent, you are welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity that you have given me. Am I audible enough?
Yes, Vincent.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, madam, for this wonderful presentation that you are from presenting right now. My question rising in terms of reading. Okay, there are some instances whereby you want to read a certain book, you have interest in learning something, and then as you start in the process, okay, it happens mostly to me, whereby I'll just read the introduction, the first chapter and the second, then I just get overwhelmed, where I'll just stop reading the book, but not finishing. So I don't know the reason behind that, but you really feel like you can continue, but you just leave it like that. So I don't know if it's, I don't know how you can help me in that area, because that's been happening over and over. Just look.
Yeah.
All right.
So you can continue. Apologies for that.
Yes, I think that's so.
All right. Okay. Then we can pick Kalumbu.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, and then you can respond to
Maybe I
the
can
questions.
respond. Oh, okay.
Mr. Kalumbu, Bupe, are you on the call?
Oh,
Okay.
I am.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Ali, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's an interesting conversation. Just a couple of questions, like, do you ever do author profiling? Like when you pick up a book before you read it, or when you read the synopsis, then you look at the name of the author, then maybe you Google them just to learn more about the author, just to see what kind of person they are, and maybe just to understand the age of the author, so that you can also just understand where they're coming from as they're writing that book, and also whether you can also relate to some of their ideologies and some of their philosophies. You know, nowadays we've got people with different beliefs. I think if you dive into certain books by certain authors, you may find you're on different planes in terms of what you believe versus what they believe. So of late, I find myself profiling authors just to understand what kind of person they are. and just to see if I agree with their content, because I've come to the understanding that these are human beings as well, and just because they've printed a book doesn't necessarily mean I should agree with everything that they've put in there. Secondly, do some titles put you off? I've noticed of late there's quite a lot of books coming up, and some of the titles may be offensive to certain people, despite the content being useful. For example, there's a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving Censored.
Actually, that came to my mind.
And there's another one. There's another one called Why Men Love
Beaches.
You know that word?
Yeah.
Yes. When you look at the title, it might be a bit offensive, but when you take time to actually go inside and then
when
look
you
at
read the
what these
book,
guys are
it's
talking
different.
about,
It talks about
it's very interesting, and these are actually things that you can actually take note of and apply. So I know someone from a certain maybe spiritual background, when they look at the title, they can be put off and say, I can't read something like that.
Exactly.
But then you find that inside is actually good. So I just wanted to find out from you and the others if they also get put off by titles. Lastly, I just wanted to say, for me, in my reading experience, I find that sometimes I need to create a balance between fun and serious books. I find that after I read a lot of like serious books, I'm trying to learn something, either motivational or self-help books, or even academic. I find like one.
We have lost.
Sorry, I could have lost you.
Yes, we have lost him. I think you can. I hope we have not lost the question that Vincent presented. I thought he will present short questions. Yes, please. You can proceed, and then we get into the chat box.
I need to pick up something which is.
Oh, he's back, Mr.
Yes. Sorry, I lost you there.
Yes. Okay. Okay, Mr. Pebu, you can briefly mention that last question. Okay, Gladys, you can proceed.
Sure.
Those are the questions which I had. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I think I got the first two. The last one, maybe you can just type it. I can pick it up. I think the first two were quite clear. The last one, your network was a bit of a challenge. But I can start with Mr. Vincent, right?
Yes, please, you can proceed.
Okay, so Vincent asked to say he usually finds himself in a situation where he starts reading a book. Maybe he reads the first chapter, the second chapter, then he doesn't really have probably the zeal to proceed to finish the actual book, or he doesn't, he loses interest or focus in terms of finishing the whole book after he's read the first or second chapter. And his question was that, have you ever found yourself in such a situation, and how do you deal with it? Yes, it's a normal situation, and even as you start, even at the time where I am, there are certain books I'll start reading, and I'm on the fourth chapter or the third chapter. I realize that ultimately, maybe I've lost focus, or I feel like I've gotten the information that I wanted from the book, and it's no longer interesting, or it loses the interest, or maybe I realize to say it's not the book that I thought it was, and therefore I'm tempted to actually leave it halfway and probably say, okay, I think I'm done with this book. So it does happen. It's normal, but I think it's something that you should be able to control and look at how you can discipline yourself to read a book end to end, because there are certain things that you will be missing out in you reading only 2 chapters because you haven't gotten the full context of what that book actually has. So my encouragement is you need to develop the discipline to be able to tell yourself to say you need to finish this book because you've started. Because what you'll find yourself doing, and it's something that I noticed at a certain period of time when I started my reading journey, I think that should have been, it wasn't even long ago, I think maybe 2 years or so ago. What I noticed is that I'll even buy books. I'll buy 4 books in a month. I'll give my target to say I'll buy 4 books and I'll read. But I realized, I think 3 months down the line, 4 months down the line, that most of the books I would have read halfway, or maybe I would have read certain chapters, and ultimately I didn't finish the books. So what I did was that I realized to say it's an issue of discipline, and sometimes not ensuring that you continue reading on time. Because what tends to happen is that if I read a chapter today and I don't read the next day, and I don't read the other day, the date which comes next. I realize that I lose that passion, I lose the connection that I had in terms of the story that I was reading, or whether it's the article that I was reading. So ultimately, there's a gap in between because of the days or the lag that I've created because I haven't read in the last 4 days, or haven't read in the last 3 days. So it becomes difficult for me to continue with that book because I would have lost the thought process in terms of how that book starts. I don't know if you've noticed, when you start a book and you start reading, there's that interest that you gain where you want to go to the next chapter, where you want to read the next chapter and see what the next chapter has for you. But immediately you stop reading it, for you to gain the same momentum after 3 days or after 4 days of not reading a book, it will become a challenge. So my encouragement is that you need to have a discipline of giving yourself time to say you would read every day first, because immediately you miss that day, it becomes a problem because you are creating a gap, you're creating a vacuum where nothing is being filled in probably your mind. Therefore, it becomes difficult to connect later on. So one of the first things you need to address is the issue of ensuring that you read on a daily basis, get that discipline, put it as your goal to say on a daily basis, I'll read for 30 minutes. And that 30 minutes, this is what I read. That's the minimum, probably. If you can go an hour, you can go an hour. That, yeah, it depends on your reading pace and what you are trying to achieve and how far you've gone. Then the next thing that you need to do is also discipline them. To have the discipline to say you will not start another book till you finish the other book. Because when you buy so many books, I'll give an example. I'll buy 4 books. There's always that eagerness to say, I want to start that other book. Even before I finish this book, or when I feel this book is not speaking to me or speaking to my mind, I would want to pack it and quickly move to the next one, which I will probably won't finish as well. So I think the discipline of you getting the, of you reading every day, having a set time to read your books, as well as ensuring that you actually finish your book, because it's like you're finishing your workout. I love to compare reading books to physical exercise. You need to have that routine to say, okay, I've gone for my exercise and I'll do my exercise during this period, and I'll do it for this particular time. And these are the workouts that I'll actually do, and ensure that you finish them. Thereafter, I think that process of you finishing a book will actually be developed, and you will not leave anything unattended to. The major challenge that we have is that we read books, sometimes the same book, you'd want to read it today, and the next day that you connect to finish reading your book will be maybe 5 days later. That in itself brings you down, because what you realize is that the interest in that book will slowly diminish, and maybe you will not have the zeal that you actually started with. So that's one of the things that has helped me to actually manage that issue that you've actually raised around probably starting a book and leaving it halfway, or maybe you've read 2 chapters and you're no longer interested. However, there are times where you're reading certain books, and if they don't speak to you, or it's not what you want, and you're really convinced to say this is the wrong book, or somebody mentioned to say where you are not in agreement with the content, I think it's fine to leave it. But I love to finish what I start. So I need to understand, even as I am packing to say that book is wrong, it's got wrong content, I should speak from somewhere. I should speak from a point of truth to say, I've read it end to end, and maybe the content is not as good. So I would encourage you to probably ensure that you read daily, and don't miss days, because that can actually derail you. I hope that will actually help.
All right, those from Mwango.
Okay. Then the next questions from, I think Mwango was, you asked to say, I'll mix them up in terms of how they've come. He asked to say, do certain books put you off? Do certain titles of certain books put you off? I'll give an example of the book that he's just given as an example. I think it's one of the books that I dreaded the most, to say I cannot read this book because of the title, because of the values that I probably hold or uphold. But I was later on meant to understand to say some of the titles are just used by writers to get the attention of the people, not really that's what's in the book. So I have that book that you've talked about, the subtle art of not giving the F word, However, what I realize is that the content in the book is completely different compared to the title of the book. So I think I had to have a mindset change or a mindset shift to say it's not every book that has a wrong title, which is wrong, but also maybe just read through in terms of just the introduction also, as well as just a bit of the background of the book that will give you more information in terms of what the book is all about. So I used to judge the book by its cover, but I realized to say it's true that you don't judge a book by its cover. So it was different content. Then you asked to say if you tend to research more about the author of the book before you actually start reading or buy a book. Yes, I tend to do that, but most of the books that I read, maybe because of being found in community of people who read as well as people who recommend certain books, I think my selection has been based on recommendations. Most of my selections of books has been based on recommendations, and recommendations from people of the same values and like-minded people. But yes, sometimes I tend to do that just to understand where this person is coming from and probably who they are. And sometimes when you are told about a certain book written by a certain author, you want to know more, to say, what is this author about, and why did they write this, or what do they do, or who are they, and just get more details. So I think I do that, but it's not really a prerequisite where I'll not buy a book because I have reviewed and validated what's going on. So what I do is just review, and maybe for my own interest, to just understand who this person is. So that will actually help me. The last question, I think he had the last question, right?
It was a comment, I think, which he talked about.
No, he had, I thought he had 3 questions.
Yes.
Okay.
But it was like a comment, and I didn't pick it clear because it was breaking, but he dropped it in the chat box concerning the titles. Okay, so let's pick 2 questions from the chat box. So there's
I think there's one from Mutinta.
Okay, there's Kunda. So yeah, so there's
Kunda.
one from Kunda, which says which reading style is more effective with regards to growing one's mental strength, between reading silently from the heart or a little bit louder? Which one? There are people who want to read and disturbing the next person, and there are people who just keep quiet, and people be like mumbling, you just see something like that. Okay, so Kundanani wants to hear your recommendation.
Yeah, so again, it's not casting stone, but usually people who try to read loud are those that maybe feel they cannot understand while they read silently. Like, yes, maybe they haven't yet developed their reading abilities to a certain level, and therefore reading silently is not natural. So for them to understand what they're reading, they have to read loudly, or a bit, not loudly that they are actually making noise, but just to read, for them to actually hear themselves so that they're able to understand. So again, if you're starting, I think it's fine, but I would encourage you to read silently, because as you need to build that capacity for you to be able to read silently, because you can imagine, like Mr. Muller has already indicated, there are those who would want to read loud and make those noises. It goes probably with an issue of, is that how you'll be reading, maybe even in public, because there are certain habits that die hard, because you find yourself doing that in a public place. So I'll prefer that you can read like that when you're starting, but aim to develop the art of reading silently, because it will also help you to just develop yourself. Because you can imagine you're in a library, but you want to read a little bit loudly to yourself. I think it might be disturbing for others, or it might be uncomfortable for you. So I think I would encourage you to actually start building that art of reading silently. I think it's just a good practice and a good habit. Not sure, Mr. Muller, what you think, because you're also here to just guide.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Mutinta Amamba. Mutinta, she's very interested. She has liked your presentation. So she said, I'm interested in probably the best way into inculcating the culture of reading into children at home. Mutinta, want to have a family that reads. How best can you help her so that she can inculcate the values in the children at home?
Sure. I think that's a noble cause or a noble thing to actually seek out for, because once you inculcate such a culture in young people, even as they grow, it's something that they'll not depart away from, or it's something that will be embedded in them. They'll not reach a certain stage and start seeking to actually develop that probably habit. So I think one of the things that you can do is maybe get them storybooks and get them something interesting that will that they will love, because young people are not they need something exciting. They need something that will actually draw them closer. So what you can do is buy them storybooks, notebooks, something that will be of interest to them. And one of the things you can do is also read to them as a family. You read the books to them, like make it more like a family gathering where you can read the book as a parent, but also challenge them as they start to say today or tomorrow, maybe if there are 2 girls or 3 girls or 3 boys or 2 girls, whatever, you just say, okay, today maybe Monica will read for us, or there's a chapter that I want this person will read for us. That way they'll get excited. Make it exciting for them so that they're able to participate and they know what is expected of them. Before you know it, embedding a culture of reading, they'll want to do it because probably, there's in young people, not that it's something that we should promote, there's always that thing that want to be the best to mommy, or they want to come out the best to daddy. So there's always that excitement that you can actually create within themselves. That's healthy excitement without creating a competitive environment, because they're young people. So that can help them to actually enjoy the reading time. You can tell them to say, maybe this hour, maybe 21 hours before you go to bed, it's reading time. We'll read for 30 minutes and this is what they'll read. Even Bible stories, if you'd want, make them read those stories, and that will actually help them to build that probably reading culture in them.
Oh, there's a comment from Mwanko. Thank you, Mwanko, for keeping us alive. You are so active. He's responding that discipline with a side touch of consistency. I think he's responding to helping the family to read together. So I want to comment as well to Mutinta. I think the modern house today, when you get into the house, the first thing that will welcome you, it's the big plasma on the wall side, and kids are holding the remotes. There are few homes where you will find that kids are holding onto books. So develop the culture as well of buying books and lead by example, and the kids will follow. Normally, what we always want to look for is what is the latest gadget that we will give to our kids. But look for a book as well that you can give to the kids. So if we don't have questions or comments, I can ask a question. Maybe that can be the last question. My question will be, Gladys, according to your observation, do Zambians read? And if they do, please share with us some exciting stories. And if they don't, share with us on what is happening and how we can improve on that. Thank you.
It's a general question, and I'll say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, like the saying goes, if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. I think the reading culture is quite bad, especially with the coming of social media. I think people are now only reading the social media articles, for lack of a better term, or spend most of their time actually on social media than actually taking a book to be able to read. So I think those are the negative connotations that come with social media, unfortunately. But also, I would say there is a generation or a culture that is coming up with a movement of readers like yourselves and who have come together to say, we will read. And we should be able to promote this culture and be able to support these people, because it's a good cause. It starts by one, and you can and if there's a decision by one person, they can impact several others. Your club, your book club, came as a vision just last year, and you already have 300 plus members who are already subscribed to this. So it's like there is more room to be able to actually bring in more people, more Zambians to be able to read. And there is, the harvest is plenty, or there are a lot of people who want to read, but maybe they may not have platforms such as this or encouragement from people like yourselves who are on this group to be able to read. So my thinking, or probably my mind, is we need to do more as readers to see how we can encourage others to read, and see how we can actually bring Zambia to where it should be, and remove it from where it is. To say that we read as Zambians, majority of us, or majority of the Zambians, don't read, unfortunately. I think they spend most of their time on social media.
All right. Thank you very much, Gladys. And I think this brings us to the end of our program. We are within time, but with that extra, maybe we can take it 10 minutes. So I don't know how wealthy you are in an hour, but you have shared with us this priceless moment which we can't pay you back if you had asked us to pay. We are so grateful with the experience, the knowledge that you have shared with us. If you go through in the chat box, you can get the feedback right away. People are posting how much they have appreciated the content that you have shared with them. You have spent an hour with us, and we are so grateful. And one comment that you made, which I will use to close as a closing remark. We are seeking as SmartVersity to improve the culture of reading. And when people read, they will find their path. They will seek development. They will develop themselves. They will develop their homes, their communities, and we can have a better Zambia. So as we read and we want to inspire growth, the question that I can ask to my fellow readers: what do you want to develop yourself into when you read, when you are exposed to all the kind of the content? What do you want to develop yourself into? This is the question that Gladys asked us in her presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, as we go to sleep, even as you are reading any book, ask yourself, what do you want to develop yourself into? As SmartVersity, we inspire growth, we inspire self-development. Gladys, I'm so grateful for speaking to us this evening. I don't know if you have any word to say before we call it a night.
No, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the great questions that came through. I do hope that I was able to answer all the questions, and hopefully, probably we should be able to connect even as we go on. And thank you for the opportunity for this platform.
All right, thank you very much, and good night. Ladies and gentlemen, the next session we are going to have Maria Akani. She's going to speak to us on mental health issues. So keep checking what is happening in our conversations in our WhatsApp group. Maria Akani, she has confirmed on the 20th February she's going to be with us. So prepare some questions, prepare any questions concerning mental health? I think we have so much pressure as we are living today. Other scholars, they are saying that the career people, over 60% of the people, they are suffering from mental health issues because of work pressure, family pressures, and things surrounding our society. So we need, as we seek developing ourselves, there should be a balance to see that even our mental status is sound and normal. Without further much ado, please, good night. Thank you, Gladys. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you. Bye-bye.